Hey there. Do you ever get frustrated when you're like, I know who my target audience is, I know who my ideal donor is, but I don't really know how to go about getting my message out to them, testing it, and making sure I'm doing the right thing, or kind of fighting that balance of doing that work upfront versus just kind of going after and trying to get the money? That is what we're talking about today, and I am so thrilled to have my guest, Tim Fitzpatrick, joining me to talk about this very topic. Tim is an entrepreneur, business owner with expertise in marketing and business growth. He has 20 plus years of entrepreneurial experience with a passion for developing and growing businesses. That passion served him well in operating and managing a wholesale distribution company he co-owned for 9 years. The company grew an average of 60% a year before being acquired in 2005. Since then, he's had failures and successes that have been valuable learning experiences. He started Rialto marketing in 2013 and has been helping service businesses simplify marketing so they can grow with less stress. Most people overcomplicate marketing. Doesn't have to be that way. We have a great conversation about all the things with reaching your ideal client, ideal donor. And I really think that this is going to be an episode to help you make tangible steps in order to refine your messaging and refine how you reach out to those potential donors. So I hope you'll take a listen. It's a great episode. But before we get into this episode, it is brought to you by our new quiz. Should you DIY your website? Having the right messaging on your website is really important and critical in working through and connecting with your ideal donor. And so it might be time to take a look at what you've got going on. It might not. So take our quiz to find out what works best for you. You can do that at thefirstclick.net/quiz. And of course, we'll be sending you all sorts of free resources with where you're at to help you keep working through the process. So again, that's thefirstclick.net/quiz. Let's get into the episode.
You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern, and each week I bring you tips from myself and other experts, as well as hot seats with small business owners and entrepreneurs to demystify digital marketing and get you on your way to generating more leads and growing your business.
Hey, everybody. Welcome Tim Fitzpatrick to the podcast. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sammy, thanks for having me. I'm excited to dig into this with you.
Yeah, so we're talking target market, and we all kind of have our thing that we love to talk about with digital marketing. Why is target market your jam?
Target market and all the other associated fundamentals of marketing are my jam because so many people skip them and they wonder why marketing's not working. And it all comes back to the fundamentals. It's just what we find is there are so many, organizations, businesses that are just battling information overload when it comes to marketing. There's so many different channels and all kinds of tactics within those channels. They're just not sure what that next step should be to get where they want to go. And the vast majority of time, it all comes back to the fundamentals. Because the way I think about the fundamentals they are the gas. The tactics are the vehicle. And so if you got the tactics, but you have no fundamentals, you have a car with no gas, and it's not going to work very well. But once you have the fundamentals in place, then all the tactics that you've been using, you've got the gas you need to get those where you want to go. So, and with target market, everything from a marketing standpoint starts with who. Who are you going to work with? In the case of nonprofits, is who do you serve, but also who are going to be the best people to help fund what you are doing.
I mean, I think that's such a good analogy to think about. If you don't have gas in the car, you can't go anywhere. Yeah. So let's just assume we kind of know who our target market is, because that's definitely the critical first step. But then I feel like a lot of organizations are just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, like, well, we know who we're talking to, but they don't take the next step of then utilizing that in their communication and in their marketing, or talking about that with their team in order to make sure everybody's on the same basis. So once we kind of know who our target market is, how do we go about kind of figuring out where they are, which, correct me if I'm wrong, might be the next best step?
You're totally spot on. So once you have those buyer personas or, ideal donor avatars, whatever the heck you want to call them, you have an outline of who those ideal donors are. Then and only then can you move to the next step, which is creating a list, right? One of my mentors said success starts with a list.
Yeah.
We need to create a list of where those people are. Like, where do they congregate offline and online, right? So we're doing this for a client right now, who's not, they're not a nonprofit, but we're creating that list for them of, they are very clear that their ideal clients are veterinarians. Where the heck are veterinarians, right? Where do they exist? Sammy, this is a 22-page Google Doc at this point.
Wow.
Of where they are. Now, that doesn't mean that, our client is going to go to every single one of those places. It just means that they now have a very targeted list of where they can be to get their message in front of the exact people that they intend to work with. So rather than casting a line out in the middle of the ocean, hoping that we're going to catch some fish, we have no idea what kind of fish we're going to catch, but let's hope we catch something. Rather than doing that, when you've got this list, I'm fishing for trout, and I'm going to go right down to the local trout farm that I know that's what they farm trout. Like, I know there's a ton of them in there, and if I put my line in there, odds are I'm going to catch trout pretty freaking fast. That's what we're doing. We're making sure that you get your message in front of the exact right people. Because why would you want to put your message out in front of a bunch of people that it's not going to mean anything to? You're wasting time and you're wasting money. You might get lucky.
Right.
But running marketing by like throwing spaghetti up against a wall, hoping something's going to stick, is not a sustainable strategy. It's just a waste of time and a waste of money. And inevitably, when things work, you have no idea why the hell they worked.
Right. You don't know what to double down on. Yeah.
You're like, what should we double down on? I have no idea. Well, where did these people come from? So we have to have a plan. And part of that plan is first understanding those ideal people. And then the second part of that, as you touched on, is creating that list. And then once you have that list, then you can start to say, okay, we're going to test these 2 things or these 3 things and get our message in front of our ideal donors in these spaces because we know they're there. It's what's the common quote, like birds of a feather flock together, right? Once you understand who your ideal donors are,
yeah,
and then you can start to pinpoint, well, like, where do they go?
Yeah.
What organizations are they involved in? Where do they get information from online? What kinds of Facebook groups are they interested in and active in? What are there specific, podcasts that they tend to listen to? Are there offline organizations that they belong to, or associations? Mm-hmm. All of these things are potential places that you could go once you identify your ideal donors. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be there, especially with donors. It depends. The more narrow you can get from a donor perspective, the easier and the more targeted it's going to be when you start to create that list. If it's very broad, well, our best donors are, small business owners in the community.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty broad. You really do need to get very, very focused, because it's going to make your job much easier to pinpoint where they are when you go narrower. And the other thing is, nonprofits, small businesses, you cannot target broadly, because broad targeting costs a ton of money.
That's a great point.
Okay. You can't broad targeting, like Coke and Amazon, large organizations can target broadly because they have the money to just throw at it. But they spend hundreds, if not billions of dollars on marketing overall. Nonprofit doesn't have that kind of money, right?
No.
So we got to hone in on it. And you create that list.
When you've presented these lists to your clients before, I'm sure that there's things on there that surprise them, right? Like it might, offline, online, they might not see things that their board members are pushing them to be on, or they might, I'm sure that some of the things are surprising to them. So how would you kind of encourage organizations to take a look at those lists when they put it together and kind of get real with themselves to say, okay, this might not be what you expected, but trust the process and kind of work through the system?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Sammy. They have to trust the process because you came up with this list based on the research that you've already done on your ideal donors. So you talked to your ideal donors. You interviewed them to really make sure you understand them. You know what makes them tick. You know what things they like, what their hobbies are, their interests, all of those things. And you came up with this list because of that information that you gathered. So you have to trust that the information that you gathered is accurate. And so in some cases, you may have to spend some time really getting to know your ideal donors. Mm-hmm. You are far better off taking the time to do that right than being impatient. This is we need to think long-term here. Right? Yeah. Because if you think short term, you are bound to make decisions. You're bound to make rash decisions that are detrimental to your long-term success.
I'm so glad you said that.
Would you rather take, 2 to 3 months, if it takes this long, to work through this process so that you are hyper-focused and hyper-targeted, and the results that you're going to gain from your efforts are much more effective? Or would you rather just jump in and start taking action and 3 months, 6 months from now going, gosh, we've done all these things, but it's still not working? And then guess what? You got to go back to the beginning of the process anyways. So you're really not losing time. You're just focusing on something different in the beginning that for a lot of people requires some reminders that we need to have patience and we need to trust in the process.
Well, I think that's where we see burnout with fundraisers, because they're working so hard on just like the churn and trying to we have to hit this monthly goal, and then we have to hit the next monthly goal, and then we have to hit the next monthly goal, as opposed to saying, like, how do we look big picture and kind of see all these things? So you mentioned, like, yes, developing the list and then kind of starting to work through it. So do you prioritize your list as in, like, the number 1 through 5 are like the most targeted, effective places to start, and then they kind of get more broad as you work down the list? And like, how much time would you spend on kind of each area before you kind of move to the next?
Yeah. So what you choose to focus on in the list you create is going to depend on a few things. First off, like, what's your budget, and how much time do you have? You gotta either pay somebody to do this, or you have to have people on staff that can do it. Yeah. So we need to understand what you have to work with. Once we understand what you have to work with, then you can start to pick and choose what you're going to bite off on that list and what you're going to do. Because some of those things may take time and money. Some of them may take just one or the other. And so that's going to help you kind of hone in and focus on what you want to do. But here's the other thing that's really important to keep in mind, Sammy. Just because your donors are at these places doesn't mean that every one of these elements that's on this list is going to work equally well. Right. Marketing is about testing. Like, I don't care what other marketers say. There is no foolproof silver bullet system, like, do this and you're going to get these results. People that say that are full of it, and they're trying to get you to take action. Every company has certain things that are unique to them, slight differences, those slight differences can create dramatic changes in whether a specific marketing tactic works or not, or works well for them or not. So it's about testing. So we need to have the patience to say, hey, based on what we have to work with, our budget and the resources, the staff time, the staff capability, right? If you want to get involved in a Facebook group where potential donors are, but Joe wants to do it, but he has no idea what the hell Facebook is all about, that's probably not a good fit. So we need to make sure that they have the capability as well.
Mm-hmm.
But once you determine that, then you're going to pick and choose. Hey, based on what we have to work with, we're going to focus on these 3 things or these 5 things on the list, and we're going to test them for a period of time to determine whether we're starting to gain traction from these things. Now, the next question that commonly comes up is, okay, well, how long is that time?
Yeah.
In my opinion, when we look at least 90 days. So we do marketing planning in 90-day sprints. 90 days is long enough to start seeing traction, but it's short enough where you can start to make course corrections and look at what's working and what's not. But what I will say is you have to have patience. 90 days for the most part is not long enough to determine whether a specific marketing tactic is something that you should continue to do, abandon completely. Most marketing tactics take time. There are some things that are lower hanging fruit, but just make sure, I'm trying to remember, there's a story that people commonly tell, and I can't remember what book it's from, but it's about, this guy that buys land and he's digging for gold, right? And he spends all this money digging. They don't get to it. He decides to sell the land. He sells it at a discount, and the next people that bought it, they dig down like a foot and they hit gold. So, a lot of people give up just before they hit success. So have patience. I would test in 90-day sprints and just look for traction. Are you starting to gain traction? Now, just because you're starting to, if you're starting to gain traction, then cool. Let's keep doing it and see if it continues to build. If you're not gaining traction, what you need to then determine is it just, this is just not a good fit, or is it our approach to this particular avenue on our list is not right and we need to tweak that? Mm-hmm. So, you kind of got to look at it and just determine, hey, do we need to abandon? Do we need to make slight tweaks and then see if we start to get better traction? But the key here is, based on the research you've already done, that everything on that list is where your ideal client, where your ideal donors are going to be.
Well, because I feel like that's the hamster wheel we get on, is like, okay, well, I did Facebook for a week and nothing happened. So
it didn't work.
Then we switch. And then you're right. You're not going to see any results from anything because you don't have enough data to understand why it didn't work. Was it the messaging? Was it the campaign? Was it what? I mean, it could be a whole host of things.
Yeah.
So do you like to recommend, so let's say we have on our list a combination of offline and online. So maybe it's like a direct mail piece that goes out to a specific audience versus a Google ad campaign versus, I don't know, like a email marketing campaign. Do you kind of recommend people A/B test multiple types of things, or that maybe they at one time say, okay, well, we're going to go in on email. So we're going to test these, different kind of messages and different kind of subject lines. We're going to focus on that, or we're going to send out different direct mail pieces to some different associations that make sense for where our ideal customer is. Like, what does that kind of look like when you're just getting started?
How much, one, you always need to be testing. How much A/B testing you do is going to come back to what you have to work with, right? The important thing with A/B testing to remember that's critical is you can only test one variable at a time.
Yes.
If you test multiple variables, you have no idea what worked. So let's just take the direct mail piece, for example. If you're going to A/B test 2 different direct mail pieces, you can't change the color and the design on them and change the content and go, well, this one worked, but no, that you don't, maybe one worked better than the other, but you have no idea which element there worked better or not. So what you really need to do there is say, okay, here's the flyer. We're going to change the headline.
Yeah.
Right. And A/B test important elements. Headlines,
like the call to action.
Yeah, calls to action, those types of things. Like, don't get caught in the weeds on, oh, what if we change the color of this button from yellow to orange? Like, no. Test things that the larger elements. Test the 20% of elements that drive 80% of the results. But you can only test one thing at a time. So in an email, subject line. Right? Test 2 different subject lines, but the email itself is the same. Cool. This one worked better. If you want to test another subject line, cool. If not, use the same subject line that you know already worked really well, and then change something else in the copy, but only one element in the copy. So that's really, really important because you cannot effectively A/B test if you're changing multiple things at the same time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it could even be like, let's say you are doing direct mail pieces and you don't have a budget to do multiple flyers, then maybe you're sending the same flyer to 2 different audiences to see which one resonates better. So it could be, I think we overthink the A/B testing a lot of times. So just dumb it down.
Yep. For lack of a better term, right? It's, you just need to determine what you're going to test and then test that one variable. You know, like you just said, you're sending out the same piece of direct mail, but to 2 different markets. Well, it's your A/B test in the market to determine which market's responding best to that particular message.
Yeah. Are there different places where you would find your target market that might take more or less time? I know you mentioned 90 days, but like, are there certain things, like I would think a direct mail piece, maybe you could do a little bit faster because it's like, hey, we send it out on this day. We have this call to action. We didn't get results within, or we got great results, or we didn't get great results within 2 weeks. Like that might be a little bit faster versus maybe like testing a social media campaign, which might require multiple weeks and multiple posts. Like how do you kind of compare those types of activities?
You have to look at the medium, but you also have to consider, and I've seen this number vary, but typically anywhere between 5 to 10% of your audience is going to be ready to take that next step, you know, buy, donate, whatever it is at any given one time. So if you're not staying in front of your audience on a consistent basis, you're missing out on when they're actually going to be ready to take that step. You know, here's what I'll say. Like, I think, yes, you can test things quickly, right? You can test, hey, what kind of responses are we getting to, you know, this headline versus this headline? That you can test quickly. Can you determine whether direct mail to that market is effective in a quick period of time? No, you cannot.
Yeah.
You can't just send out one piece of direct mail. Like it has to be multiple. In the case of like consider offline. Like let's say you've determined that offline, you know, your ideal donors are in Rotary clubs for, you know, or Kiwanis or whatever it is. You can't join a group like that and go once.
Right.
Like, you know, like that's relationship building. You know, people have to get to know you before they're going to start to want to do it. So, you know, that's why I say most things take time, but there are certainly things that you can test if you.
Well, and let's touch on this. I like that you brought up the relationship piece of it, because I think sometimes when we go to the data mode and we kind of start to structure it, we kind of can sometimes have the personal part taken out. And really what this is meant to do is make everything more personal, whether it's one-on-one or a bulk kind of situation.
Yeah.
So how do we or what tips do you have for people to keep things, like to kind of change our mental head around, okay, I know who this person is, so now I'm going to talk to this one person in all of my communication, even though it's going out to a bulk of people.
Okay, say that again. I want to make sure I've got this.
Yeah. Like, I think we tend to think, well, if I have my ideal donor, I know who I'm talking to, but if I hone in on that one person and write an email just to that person, or write a direct mail piece just to that person, or write a social post just to that person, everyone else is going to feel left out. And that kind of feels like it's a change of mindset in how we kind of approach creating those things.
Yeah, it is. So that's a very common roadblock when we talk about really narrowing down who you're going to reach out to. The thing that is important to keep in mind, one, we're not saying those are the only people that who are going to donate. We're just saying those are the only people that you're going to focus your donation efforts on, because again, we can't target broadly. And when you narrow it down, the message you communicate to those people is much more relevant. And because it's more relevant to them, it speaks to them, it's in their language, it works better. It converts. And you can't use the same one message to everybody. It falls flat. So your efforts will actually be much more effective than they are now if you're targeting broadly.
Yeah, I use like the bullseye analogy. Like if you're playing darts or whatever, like the goal is to always hit the bullseye. And so that's who our marketing messaging is directed to. But you hit all around that also. So like you're still pulling in those people on the periphery, but the goal is always to get that bullseye, because that's the quickest win and the donor that's going to stick with you the longest. When you can't
hit a target you can't see. Mm-hmm. If your target's too broad, it's like it just looks like white space, right? I mean, so it's gotta be narrow enough where you can hone in on exactly where they are.
I love this. Well, I think you've given us a lot of things to think about as far as like how we go after our market once we know who they are. Are there any kind of last tidbits or tips that you want to share before we wrap this up?
Yeah. I'll leave your audience with this, because we did cover a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up all the time with marketing is metrics. Like there are so many different metrics out there. If you're not if you haven't identified what metrics you need to track, you're not going to be able to determine whether your marketing's working or not. And one of the common things that happens with metrics is people focus on vanity metrics that don't mean anything. Like how many people are on your email list? Who cares if, you got a donor list and none of those people are donating, right? Yep. So we really need to focus in and hone in on those metrics that really matter to help determine whether our efforts are working or not. So don't get caught up in vanity metrics. Make sure don't track too many metrics. Like start small and make sure that they're the metrics that are actually going to inform your decisions in the right way. So keep it small. We tell people to start with like 3, maybe. And really, if you can expand from there, but start small. I think the most important ones, like if you're trying to track like, donations, it could be number of donations, average size of donations. I also think it's important to know who they came from and where those people found you. So which donors and how did those donors come to you? Because if you track how the donors found you, that's going to start to tell you what marketing channels, tactics you're using are actually bringing donors into your world.
I love that. And we have, we'll link this up in the show notes, but episodes 142 and 142 and 111 dive deep into data and marketing. So if you're hearing what Tim's saying, which I hope you are, because it's spot on, check out those episodes if you want to dive deep into data tracking. Tim, this was awesome. If people want to find out more about you and kind of take advantage of some of the resources you have, how do they do that?
Yeah, the best place to go, Sammy, is our website, which is rialtomarketing.com. That's RIALTO marketing.com. The other thing I will make available for your audience, we're big in those fundamentals. Like I said, target market, messaging, planning, everything starts with a plan. If they want to get the 90-day marketing plan kit that we use, they can go to growthmarketingplan.com. That's growthmarketingplan.com. There's instructions there. All the downloads, the tools that they need to get started are right there at growthmarketingplan.com.
That's awesome. And we will also link all those up at the show, in the show notes. It'll be at thefirstclick.net/148. Tim, this was awesome. Thank you so much for giving everybody kind of tactical ways to start to reach out to their audiences, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Huge thank you to Tim Fitzpatrick for joining me today. It was such a great episode. I know that it has me thinking about building my big list. 22 pages in a Google Doc, holy cow. But with just a little bit of research, you can really pull it all together and really make sure that your process is working. I hope that you try this. I know that you'll see better results with your donors and finding the right donors that are going to give to you over and over and over again, right? We want to work on that retention. We don't want to have people that are just giving to us one time. So I hope that you'll subscribe wherever you listen, and make sure you check out the video version of this episode at thefirstclick.net/YouTube. We'll see you in the next one.